The Search Division of Sephardic Bikor Cholim. We are the educational advocacy program where we help you get what you need to help your child succeed in school. If your child is an early childhood person, we want them to succeed in early childhood.
Okay. No, it's fine.
Okay, are we good? Okay. So at Search, we advocate for you at the New York City Department of Education. We also can advocate for you at MOES, thanks to Gloria Hazan, who is our new New Jersey Search person. She can work with you with the school your child is in. She can work with you in MOES. And what she does and what we do is help you understand your child's strengths, your child's weaknesses, so that you can help your child succeed to the best of his or her ability. We also run programs like this one. This summer, we have a homework club. It takes place at the SBH building on Norwood Avenue. For $10, you drop your child for 1 hour on Wednesdays. Today it's at 5:30. All you have to do is sign up. Your child will get a slice or two of pizza, a little prize, and the homework done so that they don't show up at the end of August with that notebook full of summer homework saying, "Look, Mommy, we never did this." We'll help you get it done. Okay, so please, if you have school-age children up to 5th grade, please send them. We help them with that. We also have in Brooklyn the Parent Engagement Center, which is a very important program funded by the New York City Department of Ed, and that is free one-on-one counseling with a therapist who can work you through parenting issues for your children age 5 and up. It is a Title I program, but you don't have to have a child in Title I in order to be eligible. This doesn't involve insurance, it doesn't involve copay, it doesn't involve the school. It is confidential, personal, and private, and we offer this free for families only in Brooklyn, because it is funded by the New York City Department of Ed. So if you or anyone you know needs parenting help, we can give that to you for free. This is something that people work very, very hard to accomplish. It's Title I funds, as you all know, because we all pay tuition. Yeshivas do not get federal help, state help, city help for anything. That's all on us. But this is a way where some of our tax dollars actually come back to us in the form of counseling and it's called Title I, and we have been extremely fortunate that we've gotten that. So it's called the Parent Engagement Center. You can feel free to contact us. Our number is everywhere and it's on the flyer. If you want to register for Homework Club, stowell@sbhonline.org or look us up. Please follow us on Instagram, SBH_search. We have a lot of educational things that we post. And plus you can find out about all these fabulous programs. We are pleased and thrilled to have our early intervention therapist panel today. And I want to introduce our people. We have Sophia, Hazan, we have Dervich, we have Renee Zarif. These are people who manage and work with our children in the community. They know our community well. They are very well respected therapists. And they're here to talk about the different things that the program is called How Am I Supposed to Know? We don't always know what our children need. Sometimes schools tell us, sometimes our pediatricians tell us, sometimes we have a gut that we think something's not going well. And we are pleased and thrilled that we have our panelists here. I also just want to thank Sari Towell, my associate advocate, and Barbara Sutton, my chair, they have managed this whole thing. there are a lot of people to thank. So I'm not going to mention everybody, but I just want to mention those two because without them, this program really would not happen. And without further ado, take it away.
Thank you. Can I have that microphone?
Yes, you're going to need it. Yes.
And of course, this would not have happened without Miriam. So everybody, please thank you, Miriam. I'm so happy to be here to be presenting this panel of superstars today. It's very important to me that you all are here. Our program is called How Am I Supposed to Know? And I want everybody to know that as a parent, you're not supposed to know. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Give yourself a break. We're here to help you. Parenting doesn't come with a manual. But we're very fortunate in this community to have SBH and to have Search. We are here to take all the questions, to field everything, so don't worry about it. If you come away with just one little nugget today, it's that you are your child's best advocate and only voice in this world. And we're here to help you be that by arming you with as much knowledge as we can so that you can go out and feel confident. And whenever you have questions, wherever you need us, we're here. So this is just one of the things that we're here to help you do. I'm not going to further introduce the panel because I do want them to introduce themselves. So if you guys wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your professional background, and perhaps maybe what a typical day might look like in your specialty.
So hi everyone, my name is Sophia Hazan. I work primarily with infants ages 0 to 3. I got my bachelor's and master's degree from Brooklyn College in communication, arts and sciences, and I worked in early intervention right out of graduate school, so it's really my first love. And of recent, I mean maybe 5 years now, I also specialize in feeding and swallowing therapy. So I work with babies and children up till age 12 on any issues they have with feeding and or swallowing. And I recently opened my own private practice in Brooklyn, and I see babies and children there all day, every day. And it's been great there, and a day in the office is exciting, hectic, but it's basically a mix between speech therapy and feeding therapy, and I work with a lot of children that are medically involved, so maybe sometimes they have feeding tubes, sometimes they need help with breast or bottle feeding, sometimes they need help just learning how to eat and transitioning to more solid foods. And I also work with older kids who sometimes have anxiety-related food disorders. I also work with babies on all types of speech and language disorders. So things like apraxia, phonological disorders. I mean, this doesn't really mean much to you guys, but it's a lot of speech and language, both of them. And that's really what I do, and I love it.
Hi guys, my name is Dervich and I'm an occupational therapist. I got this. If it's not, take that one. I studied play and child development in NYU for undergrad and then stayed for my master's in OT. Right out of grad school, I worked in a sensory gym with kids of all ages, you know, from babies till 16-year-olds. So I got a ton of experience there in motor development and really a lot of sensory integration and sensory processing. Now I work primarily in early intervention and privately. So a day in the life, for example, this morning, went to a 2-year-old at home, then went to a camp and saw a 6-year-old, then went to an 8-month-old in their house, and then went to an 18-month-old. So really, you know, day to day, it varies. Session to session, it varies. Like you might see me around Deal getting out of my car with like a therapy ball and a scooter board, or with like 17 shopping bags filled with toys. And so a day in the life sort of changes session to session, but most of the time you'll see us, all of us really, sitting on the floor, playing with kids, really just having a good time. And the therapy and sort of the meaning behind it all will vary from, you know, each of us. But, you know, happy to be here and welcome everybody. We're so happy you guys came. And I'm going to pass it to Renee.
Hi guys, my name is Renee Zarif. I'm a physical therapist. I went to Toronto College where I got my doctorate in physical therapy. I graduated with 2 specialties. I had a neuro adult specialty, and I also did a pediatric specialty. So I got a little bit of experience with adults with neurological disorders and with children. I then started working in an adult outpatient clinic with neurological patients, and then I also started seeing pediatrics, children of school age primarily. And a lot of the therapy that I was doing with my neurological adults was actually overlapping with what I was doing with all of my kids, because when kids are growing up, so much of their growth and development is centered around their brain and development. So much of what I was doing with neurological focused treatment was what I was also doing with my children. I primarily started working in a school age setting, so I was really working with children, I would say like between 2 and 3 to 5 years old. And then when COVID happened, I got so many phone calls about babies who are just not meeting milestones. Kids were stuck at home, not being able to be exposed to kind of like gross motor environments, going to the park, things like that. So I kind of shifted gears into early intervention. I started seeing babies, and now my work schedule really is a balance between EI, babies 0 to 3 years old, and I also see kids of the school age setting. And I kind of shifted away from adults for now, so my main focus right now is in pediatrics, and I absolutely love it. I love working with babies, I love working with children, and my day-to-day is really literally like in my car, driving back and forth between houses, schools, sensory gym, the center. It's very interesting. Like I think this whole year I did not have a set schedule because it was changing every single week, like based on calling, like, you know, parents calling and like trying to squeeze everyone in, trying to make everything work. But I feel very privileged and thankful to Hashem that I get to help mothers and guide them with their children in the best way that I can, just because I know that it could be a very daunting thing, like just raising children, raising your babies, not meeting milestones, and just having this kind of confusion, and just being able to help guide parents in this way is just, I love it so much. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm gonna try. There we go. Okay. Good. Thank you so much for all of that. I think it really does take a lot to do what you do, so we appreciate you being here. I think one of the big things that a lot of parents do want to know, or I mean, I would at least want to know, is like, children come to you from so many different ways, right? Like whether it's a pediatrician or a school. So if you can just take a second and think about your caseload and think about maybe how parents found you. How did your clients come to be your clients?
Okay, I'll start. I think that, like, in general, like the phone call that I always get is like, I think something's wrong, I'm not really sure. A lot of times I find moms, even if like they don't, let's say, necessarily know the motor milestones, you know when something's not right. Like, you know when something just isn't clicking. A lot of times moms will also get feedback from like parents or friends who have babies or children the same ages saying like, oh, like, shouldn't your baby be rolling over? Like, oh, shouldn't your baby start crawling? So a lot of times they'll get feedback from people around them. But I think in general, like, moms really just know. And I think most of the time the phone call is, I'm not really sure, what do you think? Can you come take a look? And then of course we do get phone calls saying like, you know, hi, my child is diagnosed with so-and-so disorder or whatever it is, and you know, I'm looking for a physical therapist to come and help me with my child. So along those lines.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is a lot of times in preschool, we'll get a call like second week of school, my 2-year-old can't sit in circle time. The teacher thinks I should get evaluated. Or, you know, my 2.5 or 3-year-old started biting. Is that a behavioral thing? Is that a sensory thing? Do we need therapy? So generally there is sort of someone or some moment where something just, like you said, isn't 100% or doesn't seem right, that cues a mother into, okay, maybe I do need a little bit of extra support, or maybe it's just a phone call, maybe it is a full evaluation with therapy, but there usually is some sort of external factor, either something that's observed in school, something that's observed in mommy and me. Oh, all the kids are walking, mine isn't. And I know one thing Sari had really touched on earlier was, let's try not to compare, not to look at my kid versus someone else's, but unfortunately a lot of the times that the cases come to us is because they did compare. They saw all these toddlers are walking around and mine is barely sitting, something's not right. And so in those, less often cases is when therapy is for you, and that's when you usually get the referral.
Do you have anything you want to add? Okay.
I mean, sometimes, on the rare occasion, it is a pediatrician that recommends. Sometimes. No.
Not enough.
Right.
Yeah, we're trying to
Definitely
build
not
that.
enough. I'm not gonna.
We're not bashing pediatricians.
No, we're not.
We're not. But
But
sometimes,
sometimes it
Listen
is
to
the
your gut.
pediatrician, yes, but most of the time I found that it's the mom,
it's the gut.
Yeah.
that comes to me and says, I feel like something's not right. Even if the baby is not yet speaking, and even if the baby is not yet expected to be speaking, there are other signs that sometimes the mom is like, something is not right. I talk to them, they don't smile back, they don't care for me when I, look at me when I sing songs, things like that. So a lot of times it's the mom, and then especially when they start to go to either a play group or a daycare, and then sometimes that teacher is telling the mom, I don't think he understands what's going on, so maybe get it checked out. Things like that happen a lot too.
Thank you. My next question's really, at everybody, but I think I want Lauren to go first, just because of the way this came up in my head. But if parents are thinking about not being sure whether or not something is right, something feels weird, personally, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't know if I'd run to an OT, because what do they do? I understand if they're not walking and I need a physical therapist, or they're not talking and I need a speech therapist, and so I just feel like with parents there's a large misconception about what that even is. So what is the largest misconception about your therapy, and what do you feel parents need to know?
This is always, ever since I even applied to grad school for OT, the hardest question I ever answer, because physical, like you said, very straightforward. If it's in orthopedics, you break a bone, you're rehabbing, or my baby isn't walking, we're getting there. Speech and feeding, self-explanatory. OT is not self-explanatory at all. In early intervention, we primarily target sensory, motor, play, and social skills. So a lot of the kids I see, it's more than just a motor delay or a speech delay. There is an underlying sensory processing thing going on. There is a globalized delay that's impacting speech and motor. So it's sort of the bridge between the two. I think if anyone saw me treating, they probably wouldn't know. Oh, is she doing, with that baby, it looks like she's doing PT. With that 2-year-old on the spectrum, it looks like she's doing speech. So there definitely is an overlap. Most parents, even after I've been working with the kid for a few months, are like, wait, what's the difference between you and Renee again? And so it's a gray area, but I think the biggest misconception is that OT is only for fine motor. In a school age setting with a pre-K or a kindergarten kid, yes, a lot of the times they're going to qualify for OT because they have fine motor or handwriting delays. In early intervention, it's a little bit different. It's play skills, it's social skills, it's sensory, it's motor. Maybe in an evaluation they're seeing that they're not able to stack a few blocks. Maybe they're seeing that they are not able to get dressed because they're so sensitive to different sensory input. And then maybe it also is physical and social and speech. So I feel like I probably just confused everyone so much more from my answer than from the question, but there definitely is a lot of an overlap between OT and the other two. But I would say sensory and sort of the upper body is what distinguishes it between both.
Thank you. That did help. It helped. I'm hearing a lot of different things, and why OT is so important is because it helps with the underlying causes of what might be going on. If a child's acting out, that may not be a behavioral therapist, that may be a sensory thing. If a child is biting, again, you may run to a behavioral therapist, but it may be an OT thing. So that's very interesting to think about. And then for the Renee and Sophia, what do you feel like parents should know about your therapy? What's the most common misconception that you get?
So So I think when it comes to babies, a lot of times moms are like, my baby's not walking, like you have to make my baby walk. Which it like is true, meaning like usually the baby is like much older or like a little bit on the higher end of the milestone range, and so they're delayed. But I think like the most important thing I would say is that it's not all about, let's say, the walking, right? Like I need to take a global picture of this child and really see like how they're performing. So let's say when I do an evaluation, I'm looking at how they transition, how they're seated and standing balances, what their strength is like. So it's not, let's say, all about meeting the milestone. I think that there's really a process of reaching a milestone, and for me, it's more important that we get all the components in before we say, okay, the baby's walking. Like for example, if a mom calls me and says, oh, my baby's not walking, and then I'll come do the evaluation, the baby's not even crawling, then we need to adjust that first, right? So I know that, let's say the baby's 18 months and not walking, and you really want the baby to walk, and I'm with you, but we have to figure out why the baby didn't crawl. I have to take a look at the balance, I have to take a look at the whole thing, and then we need to work on crawling and then get to walking. So I know that sometimes that can be like a little frustrating, because I know that everyone has this overarching goal of like, I just want my baby to be exactly where it needs to be, but we really want to make sure that we hit all the important gross motor milestones before we rush into walking. I think that that's like, for me, that's like the biggest thing with PT.
So I have a similar situation. I think, moms come to me and say, my baby's not talking. But a lot of times I find that the baby does not have the pre-linguistic skills, right? The skills needed before we start to even think about getting them ready to speak. They don't have those foundational skills. So oftentimes we have to work on building up the skills that are necessary for the foundation of speech before we even target words, right? And sounds and things like that. So I think that's a very big misconception. I also think this is a little bit for older kids, but I also think people don't realize that speech therapy is not only for speech. So we teach communication in all of its forms. Okay, so that is speaking, that's listening, that's reading, and that's writing. So a huge piece is listening, right? So a lot of times parents are so focused on, can you get my child to speak? But we also need to work on getting them to listen, because if you cannot process auditory information, you can't answer questions, you can't retell a story, you can't tell someone what you did that day, you can't have a conversation, right? Because you're not processing the language that's coming in. So you cannot take in what someone's saying and then pose a follow-up question. So there's a lot that goes into speech, and I do want to point out that our title is speech language pathologists, right? So it's not just about the actual speech, it's also about language, right? So it does involve grammar and vocabulary and sentence structure and all of those things. It's not just about like the actual sounds, because I think that's another misconception. People think that babies are only ready for speech therapy when they can speak. That's not true, right? It's not only about getting the sounds more precise, it's about all those pre-linguistic skills that are needed to lay the foundation for learning speech. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm hearing a lot of like holistic sort of foundational skills that need to be built, and that it's not something that just takes place over the course of, and that you find that people are like, I guess, in a rush, right? It's not something that takes place over the course of one day. It's not, we're gonna learn how to walk. It's let's take a step back. It's not, we're gonna learn how to talk. It's let's take a step back. So thinking about that, I know a lot of parents are very anxious, perhaps, especially new mothers or mothers with young children, to even say, maybe there's something wrong, maybe my child needs therapy. And now hearing this is crazy, because it's like, oh my God, it's not just one day, right? So how would you respond to a parent that asks, like, is my kid gonna need therapy forever? Like, how long, like, is this a process now for life? Because I think that's something that new parents are very worried about.
So I'll start from the OT realm. I mean, the answer to this question also varies based on, you know, the kid and why they're coming to therapy. Is there a diagnosis that they're going to have forever? Then they will probably be in therapy for a longer time. Is this something that is, you know, more sensory rooted and they're really struggling in the preschool setting, but then once they get older and learn to manage that and learn, you know, their own internal sensory things, that doesn't feel good, so I'm not going to put it on my body. Now I'm old enough to open up my closet and make that choice, as opposed to mommy's putting this sweater on me and I hate it, so I'm just going to tantrum until it comes off. That is something that is less of a sort of long-term therapy trajectory, because eventually those kids do learn, these are my preferences and this is how I can manage them. But the therapist is going to be, at least the OT, in the earlier years, in the EI years of learning, what is your child experiencing? How can you help them manage that? How can they become more self-aware of that? And how in therapy and in our activity selection can we really change the neurological process that they're experiencing from these sensory experiences? So, you know, in a nutshell, the answer really depends based on why you're seeing a child. If they're 3 and it is fine motor, every kid in the class is scribbling and they can't hold the crayon yet, yeah, maybe they'll be in EI and then they'll get reevaluated for school age and they won't qualify. So it definitely varies from case to case, but most of the time your child won't be in therapy forever. And you will learn a lot from EI. It's very family oriented and very parent training based. And you will also carry over a lot of the things that your therapists are doing. And so many of the moms I work with already feel like they can treat OT, PT, and speech for other people's kids. So there is a ton of parent education involved, and I think, long story short, like, no, there is sort of like a graduation to all of this.
Can I add something as an advocate? When we go to fight for services for our children, early intervention, Committee on Preschool Education, and Committee on Special Education, they're not running to give you services anymore. There was a time when if you had a pulse and you got evaluated, you got stuff. No longer. So if they give it to you, it's because you really qualify. We've had to fight for children who kind of ace the evaluations and yet in their actual everyday life were not coping at all. So, and really, when DOE says you're done, you're done. And sometimes maybe you're not, and we're going to fight for you to keep it. But if they're not looking to give it to you if you're not eligible. So, you know, if it's there on an IEP or in a family service plan, it's because your child needs it. And they're always looking, the idea is to get them out, is to solve the problem now so that it's no longer a problem later. I just wanted to add that from the advocate's point of view.
And just to summarize, early intervention, the actual definition of it is let's intervene early so that you don't need this later.
Right.
Let's get you what you need when you're 1, when you're 18 months, so that when you're 3, you can go to school and mainstream and not need additional support. So that's essentially the definition of early intervention, which is...
And it expires. When the child is 3 years old, it expires.
On your birthday, you're done.
So even if they give you everything, they know they could give it to you, but it's going to expire. And they want you to have it because if they give it to your child when he's 5 or she's 5, that could last till they're 18.
Right.
They don't want to give it to you then. Let's do it now because it's going to expire in 3 years.
Right. So I really think you summarized it perfectly. I don't really have much to add, but what I do want to say is that I do find that a lot of new moms, and even moms that are not new, that let's say have 4 or 5 kids, are sometimes hesitant to get evaluated, or are like, oh, like, you know, my kid had this, he's gonna grow out of it, it's gonna be fine. At the end of the day, like, take advantage of the help, right? Like, a lot of times my mom will say like, oh, we didn't have all this when you guys were little, you know? Which, like, I get, and like, it's just like, you guys are all fine, but like, also we're not. Like, I'm saying, I can also think about like so many things that, let's say, I could have had when I was little, or like, my husband has all these tics, by the way, that I'm like, you needed OT when you were little, you know?
I can't read my husband's birthday cards. I cannot read it. What does it say? What does it say?
I just feel like like, we're here to help, and so even if it's like, oh, I don't know if they're, like, just get evaluated and see, like, what the feedback is. Like we said, like, even if, let's say, they don't qualify, or if they qualify just for EI and let's say not for later on, you'll gain so much knowledge, you'll gain so much information on how to best help your child. And so, I mean, like, it's there, and I feel like, why not? Like, anytime someone's like, oh, should I get evaluated? Why not? Like, just try, and you'll see what happens. And like you said, like, it's not even that easy to get approved anyway, but it's worth definitely going for the evaluation for sure.
Thank you. On that note, I feel like sometimes schools or playgroup people or whatever will tell a parent, you know, I really think you should get evaluated, and the parent will be like, I kind of think everything's okay. Like, what would you, I mean, I guess that is what you would say, but if a school says that you need to get your child evaluated, is that something a parent should be taking seriously? Should they be worried?
So I think if a teacher is saying that, then there's definitely a concern going on for your child that's probably not going on for, you know, the other 75 to 80% of the class. So even if you think, okay, that doesn't sound like an issue my kid has at home, but maybe they're experiencing it in a group where they're not one-to-one with mommy. Or if you think, you know, my teacher maybe isn't observing or understanding my kid the way I am, like, that's where I would empower you to ask more questions. Oh, he's hitting that kid? Well, when is that happening? Is it happening at the lunch table? Is it happening in circle time? Is it happening at free play in the gym? Is it happening in small groups? You want to empower yourself to get as much information as you can. What happened before? How did you interact with him after? You know, did the other child do something? Did he observe other kids doing the same thing? A lot of times getting a lot more information will give you a better idea of, okay, wait, maybe my child really is struggling most of the day in school, and I should pursue this. And, you know, in less, I guess, often situations, sometimes it is not the best fit between the kid and the class, or even the kid and the teacher. I got a phone call on the second day of camp. Hey, I just got a phone call from camp. My 3-year-old can't come back without a shadow. Can you start working with him? Second day of camp at 11 o'clock, she got a phone call. So I said, well, is he a safety risk? Is he hurting other kids? Is he so difficult that they can't manage the group? These are questions you want to be asking, right? And so once she asked a lot of those questions, the answer to most of them were no. And we really started to learn, okay, well, the group is, the staff is actually really struggling to manage the group. It wasn't only her kid, there were actually 6 other kids that received a similar phone call. And the camp decided to, okay, well, we'll put one kid in another group. One kid really does need a shadow. We'll add another counselor. So the answer is yes. Yes, you should trust the teacher, and yes, you should pursue support if you need it. But also, yes, be your child's advocate and ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can think of, especially if something's going on in school that's never happened at home, or that really truly sounds out of character for your kid. Ask a lot of questions, but also, you guys are on the same team as your teachers, as the counselors, the school. Everyone's goal is for your kid to succeed in the setting that they're in. So, you know, they're not just trying to throw an extra support person in the room. They want your child to succeed as much as you do. So if they're reaching out to you saying that, you know, your kid could benefit from support, it's obviously something to collaborate on, but ask a lot of questions.
Yes. Can I share a point?
Yeah.
Okay, so I also wanted to share that your early intervention, especially in New Jersey, is not that easy to get. So you would need like a 33% delay in one area or 25 in 2. But just because your kid doesn't qualify doesn't mean that he or she wouldn't benefit from it. And you can go to there are agencies here that take insurance, and you can get they can qualify for the services for more like a medical approach for OT or speech or PT, and get the services that way. So if they say the child doesn't qualify, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't need it. It just means they're not functioning low enough for their service. So I wanted to share.
It's a very good point.
I also want to point out that that's what we are here for at Search. You were not expected to know that. However, we're here to help you get that. She was talking about a medical we'll help you. We'll handle it, right? So yeah, as a basic takeaway to, I guess, sum that up is like the way I like to think about it is, do I need to take it seriously if the school or camp says? Yes, and it's an invitation to ask more questions. Some really good questions that I like to ask as a parent, but I also get often as a teacher is this happening all day? Is it happening every day? Is this a sudden change? How long has this been going on? Is it in Hebrew and English or whatever it is, circle time and playtime? Could be that they need a visit to a pediatrician. Maybe they have a virus. Maybe they have strep. Is it sudden? Is it ongoing? I think all of these are things that we should be considering, and you should be asking as the best advocate for your child. Do you have anything you wanted to add, you guys? Go for it. She's the profesh.
So in terms of speech, if the teacher or the daycare teacher or whoever it is does suggest that you get an evaluation for speech, I think that it's important that you do that, even if you feel like, oh, I might not get approved or whatever, because there is, in terms of learning language, there is a very critical age period of development where learning language is optimal in that time period. It's a critical age. So I don't know if anyone ever tried to learn a language when you're older, but it's like impossible. So I think that you need to take advantage of the time, and even if it is just a delay versus a disorder, it's still worth it to get your child help during that time, because they'll have to catch up at some point, right? Also, like you were saying, in New York, it's also very hard for them to get approved for early intervention, which is why a lot of the children end up in my practice, because they were denied services. But now I do my evaluation and I'm like, okay, this child could definitely benefit from services. So it's just, you didn't qualify according to their standards, but your child could definitely still use the help, especially during that critical age when we're best learning, it's optimal for learning language. So take advantage of that time. Yeah. It gets much harder after that. We're too old. Don't learn until this.
Thank you. So just thinking about parents now, let's say they hear that they should get an evaluation, right? What are some things that they should specifically be aware of before pursuing therapy? Like, is it speech therapy, or do I need to go to a doctor? Like, what are some things that parents should be thinking about before they get evaluated?
One thing I always ask parents is, have you been to an ENT yet? Has your pediatrician brought up any red flags or medical things, or referred you to any specialists? Maybe it's a neurologist, maybe it's a geneticist in their case. ENT is probably the first referral I always make before anything else. But otherwise, you don't need to know, do I need an OTP or speech evaluation? If there's a concern and you pursue an early intervention evaluation, a psychologist will see your child first and then decide, okay, based on what I observed and what I evaluated, we're gonna now give you an OT and a speech, or we're just gonna give you a PT. And then the individual therapist who evaluates your child will write up their evaluation, and after that, you'll get approved based on those results. But you as a parent don't need to know what specific therapy to get evaluated for.
But I do feel like they need to specify that they want it to be in more than one area. Can you do that? Because I think that sometimes they'll recommend, let's say, only doing a PT eval, but it's much harder to get approved with one discipline versus two. So I will tell parents, right?
So
just like you
right,
mentioned.
so the answer to that question is, generally, a psychologist does the screening, and also a social worker does the social history. And then there are times when they say, well, we only recommend an OT. And if we feel that there are speech issues, we will then request a speech evaluation. And once in a while, we actually get denied and we'll go back. Or sometimes through insurance, we can do it on our own and say, you know what, you weren't going to do it, but we did our own. we did this and we're submitting that to you. It really, yes, in EI you do need 2 discipline, in some places you need 2 things to be a certain delay. And by the way, in New Jersey, EI is income-based, and you may, sliding scale, you may end up paying for EI in New Jersey, you won't pay for it in New York, okay? But we sometimes do ask, and on occasion, if we are denied that evaluation, we will do a private evaluation. It's not gonna be thousands of dollars, it could be about $500. Sometimes it's worth it, because you do prove it, and sometimes, well, okay, if there really wasn't a problem, and now, if it's not a problem, now we gotta find out, well, what is the problem? You kind of, like, check off your things and eliminate the possibilities, and then every child's a puzzle, and you guys have that as well. Every child's a puzzle. What is driving this issue, and how do we fix it?
Thank you. It's just, I guess it's important for me to point out again that this is a very complicated process, and you don't have to navigate that alone. We're here to help you do that. So again, you're not totally expected to know about the 1 discipline versus 2 discipline. Call us.
Yeah.
We'll help guide you through everything.
The worst phone
All of
call
it.
I get is, Miriam, I went to my meeting, they gave me nothing, now what? That's what we call closing the barn door after the horse is gone. Like, we needed to know before. We help you lay out your case. Sometimes there are things that they don't know. By law, they have to look at the evaluations, what the parent is reporting, what the teacher is reporting, what the doctor is reporting. They have to look at everything. They can't just look at evaluations. They don't always know the law. That's what advocates do. We know the law. And we'll walk you through it, but don't call us when it's over. Call us before. And don't call me the day before, because that's really, really stressful. I did that.
You can go back
Oh, yes.
and reopen things, but we can help you build up your case so that you can get all that you can.
It's all evidence-based. If the evidence isn't in the evaluations, and there is evidence, it will be elsewhere. We will find it if it's there. And if it isn't, then this is not a problem, but we still have to dig and see what is the problem.
So I want to take 1 second to think about, so now after, let's say, right, we get approved, we have therapy. How do I know that my child's therapist is a good therapist? How do I know they're doing right by me and by my child?
So I think that the most, well, with EI, it's you know, you're going to see the therapist because the therapist comes to the home. Like, you're going to be with the therapist. So I think as long as, the therapist is going to have to ask questions, be very involved, taking a very big picture of the whole situation. You can tell that a therapist is doing their job when they're really hitting the marks of what is bothering you, or what you are pointing out to them and saying, I'm noticing X, Y, and Z. And then they're targeting those things. But also, like, it comes back to the same thing of asking questions. Like, you might see a therapist doing something and you don't really understand what they're doing, so you ask, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing that? How are we helping my child when you do this? I think that that's the best way to kind of figure out if it's the right fit. And then especially if your child is, let's say, in a play group or, like in a daycare where they're getting the therapy in that setting and you're not actually there, you really have to be on top of them. And like, every time I speak to a new mom that, like, I'm seeing their child in a nursery or in a school, I'll always tell them, save my number, call me anytime, text me anytime, and I do, like, my due diligence of trying to send pictures and updates and things like that. But you guys have to do your part. You have their number, you have their information, call them, bother us, ask us questions. That's what we're here for. Like, sometimes I wish moms asked more questions, just because at the end of the day, this is, like we said before, like, we're all on the same team, and we're really just trying to help your child in the best way we can. So working together is the ultimate goal, So I think you'll feel it, but you should also ask a lot of questions just to see kind of what their thought process is, where they're coming from. Are they kind of, meeting the goals that you had for your child, things like that.
I totally agree with that. I think that if you ask your therapist, why are you doing this? They should be able to tell you why. they need to know the reason why they're doing what they're doing. And for me personally, this is just something I'm very passionate about. Lisa, I like when a therapist is using evidence-based practice, and what that means to everyone is when they are using a technique or they are using a strategy because it has been documented in the research and in the literature that this works. This is proven. We're not just doing what we think might work, right? Like, especially I see it a lot in feeding therapy personally. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and therapists just want to look like they're doing something, and there's no evidence behind it. There's no evidence to support it. So we have to be very careful about that, and I think that, like what you were saying, if you ask your therapist, why are you doing what you're doing, and they can give you a solid reason and back it up with evidence-based research, then that's great. I also feel like every child can learn, and I also feel like it is your therapist's job to figure out how. So I've seen it before where moms come to me and they're like, it's just not working, the therapist is just, and I think that sometimes the therapist, this is, not to shame anyone, but they have to figure out how to get your child to learn. What is your child's learning style? How can they make it work? We don't just give up and say your child can't do this. It's your therapist's job to figure out how. So I think advocating for your child in that way too is important. He could do it, she could do it, let's figure out how.
Just on that note, keep in mind, having a therapist is kind of like a shidduch. You can call your service coordinator, who is your matchmaker, and say, it's not working out, please send me someone else. Obviously, you want to give them a chance, you want to ask them the questions, you want to address your concerns if there are any. But if it's been 2 months and your kid is still screaming every time they walk in the door, it doesn't hurt to make that phone call to say, this is causing more stress than benefit. Do you have anyone else you could send me? Or even, as friends or ask other therapists. You are not obligated to stay with any therapist. It happens all the time. Even great therapists are not always a fit for your kid. I've worked with kids where I'm like, you know what? Your kid needs something that I don't specialize in. And so I've backed off a case and referred it to someone else. And I'm sure we've all done that too. So just keep in mind, like, you are, in control of who spends time with your child. And don't be afraid to make a change if you feel like something's not right.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And it sort of leads me into the next question is, you as a parent have that gut feeling. So what happens if you go to a pediatrician and you ask and you say, this feels weird to me, and the pediatrician says, oh, it's very normal, he'll grow out of it, she'll grow out of it, but you still feel like something is wrong. What do you suggest a parent does?
I think we've gotten these calls all the time, A pediatrician is seeing your child for literally 2 minutes and is looking at this motor milestone, very broad list of things that they need to meet. They're not spending a whole day with your child. So at the end of the day, you know your child best. So if you're telling, the doctor, oh, my baby's not crawling yet, what should I do? They're like, oh, they're gonna learn how to crawl. But if you see that baby in your environment that's not reaching for toys, not really moving around, doesn't look like he's crawling anytime soon, something's wrong, right? Even if something's not really wrong, if you just feel like, I don't know, this is not 100%, it doesn't hurt to call a speech search and say, hey, my kid's not crawling, my doctor said it's fine, what should I do, And then we can better navigate from that point. Maybe we'll get an evaluation. Maybe we'll wait it out and we'll wait 6 weeks and see what happens, So it's always good to ask more questions, and if you have a feeling in your gut, it's there for a reason. Nobody knows your baby like you do, 100%. So as much as we respect the pediatricians and they're really doing what they need to do, they're not honing in on those specific skills and looking at your child the way you do every single day. So I would say respect your pediatrician, ask the questions you need, but if you still feel like something's bothering you, definitely find someone else to call and get more help from. Maybe get an evaluation if you feel that you want to do that. It doesn't hurt, and it's there for you, you know?
100%. I have to agree with that. I think you as a parent have that gut feeling. You know exactly, you may not know exactly what's going on, but you know that something is not right. And it's your job to sort of stand up and say something, maybe not necessarily to the pediatrician. However, you can call us and say, something still feels weird. Like you said, Renee, the doctor's looking at the milestones. And on that note, in everybody's bag in your yellow folder are a list of milestones we as the panelists all came up with, not necessarily things that the CDC has on that, but things that we see every single day that we think may be things that you should be looking out for. You can use that as a helpful reference and guidance, and for anybody watching and the thing, I have it, so email us and we can send it to you. But the one thing that I really do think that we should be taking away is that you know your child best, and you are your child's best advocate. And so if you feel like there's something going on, we are here to support you, and at the end of the day, I think that's one of the most important things.
Just in terms of feeding therapy, this speaks to this situation a lot. Sometimes a mom will tell the pediatrician, he's not eating, it's a disaster to feed him, we're both struggling, he's screaming, he's crying, I'm stressed out. And what does the pediatrician do? They take out the growth charts, but he's gaining weight. It's fine, it's all good, right? But in reality, they're both suffering. So we don't only look at one piece, we look at the quality of, what's the quality of that feeding? It's terrible, right? And oftentimes, I need to make referrals to other physicians, gastroenterologists, ENTs, whatever it may be, but they're looking at it from one perspective, and a really quick one, like you said. And it happens with speech too, right? Oh, he's waving high and by, okay, great, done. But there are things that really could be missed. So if you have a gut feeling that something else is going on, and your pediatrician is telling you it's probably fine, follow your gut and do that extra legwork. It'll be worth it.
I wanted to just, if anybody had anything else to add, otherwise, I think that our panelists are going to be here for a little bit longer, that if you had any questions, feel free to walk over to them and ask them anything that you'd like. I didn't want to open it in case things got personal and we went off on tangents. They are a wealth of knowledge. We can sit on the phone and just talk about things for ages, so take advantage while they're here.